Okay, so have you heard about this? Scientists are growing neurons
Mm-hmm.
in a dish, and get this, they can actually learn.
It's pretty amazing.
They're like straight out of science fiction,
Yeah.
but it's actually real research coming out of Tohoku University. And honestly, this could like totally change how we understand the brain.
It really could. It's a huge breakthrough. Like for years,
Mm.
scientists have been trying to like replicate how the brain works in
Right.
a lab setting.
Yeah.
But the neurons they were growing just haven't really behaved like the real thing, you know?
So what's different now?
Well, it found a way to control like how the neurons connect
Okay.
to make them behave more like, you know, those intricate networks in our brains.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using these tiny devices called microfluidic chips.
Uh-huh.
They're like, think of them like tiny custom-built highways for the neurons,
Whoa.
guiding their connections
So cool.
with crazy precision.
That's awesome. I'm sure there's got to be more to it than just connecting them, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what's the big deal about this specific type of connection?
Well, the key is something called neural plasticity,
Yep.
which is like the brain's ability to kind of change and adapt
Mm-hmm.
based on like our experiences. Have you heard the saying, neurons that fire together wire together?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. But honestly, I don't really know what it means.
Oh, it's actually pretty simple. Like every time you learn something,
Okay.
connections between certain neurons
Right.
strengthen.
Mm-hmm.
And the more those neurons fire together, the stronger that connection becomes.
Okay.
And then that makes it easier to retrieve that information later on.
So it's like building a muscle. The more you use it,
Exactly.
the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
Got it. So
Yeah.
it's like creating a well-worn path in your brain.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about this, is that they've basically like replicated that in a dish
Really?
with these lab-grown neurons and the microfluidic devices.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so why even grow the neurons in a lab in the first place?
Yeah. Right.
Why not just study, like, real brains?
Well, studying a living brain is super complex.
Oh, I bet.
Like, there are billions of neurons interacting in ways we don't even fully understand.
Oh, wow.
So by studying neurons in a lab, researchers can create a much simpler system.
Yeah.
It's like a controlled environment,
Okay.
you know, that lets them isolate certain variables and get down to, like, the nitty-gritty
Gotcha.
of how neurons talk to each other and learn.
But if those lab-grown neurons aren't behaving like real ones,
Right.
then how helpful are they really?
Well, yeah, that's the catch, right?
Yeah.
And that's where these microfluidic devices are so important.
Yeah.
They bridge that gap
They do.
between the simplicity of lab-grown neurons and the complexity of real brains.
Okay, so explain it to me. How do these devices make lab-grown neurons act more like the ones in our heads?
Okay, so they control the environment on like a really tiny level.
Mm.
These chips have these small tunnels
Right.
that guide the neurons as they grow. So researchers can create very specific connections,
Okay.
and the size of those tunnels actually changes how strong the neurons connect.
Really?
Smaller tunnels means stronger connection, just like in a real brain.
Wow, so they're like little architects
Exactly.
designing the perfect little world
Yes.
for these neurons to thrive and connect.
Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned that these lab-grown neurons can learn.
Mm-hmm.
What does that actually look like?
Well, they don't like sit in tiny classrooms or anything,
Right.
but they do show something called learning like plasticity,
Okay.
which means just like neurons in a real brain,
Yeah.
these lab-grown ones can change and adapt their connections
Okay.
based on specific patterns of stimulation.
Oh, so they're responding to like stimuli.
Right.
It's like getting little lessons, right?
Yeah, kinda.
Could you give me an example?
Yeah, so imagine giving these neurons a repeated signal,
Okay.
like a little pulse of electricity.
Mm.
Over time, the neurons that respond to that, they're going to strengthen their connections,
Yeah.
forming what we call a neuronal ensemble.
A neuronal ensemble. What is that?
It's like, think of it like a group of friends who always hang out together.
Okay.
In the brain, a neuronal ensemble is a group of neurons that fire together,
Right.
and they represent a specific piece of information
Okay.
or a memory. And the more they fire together, the stronger their bond becomes.
Right.
And the easier it is to, like, access that information.
Got it. So these little lessons are creating little neuron clicks in the dish.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
That's so cool.
And so here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
With traditional lab-grown neurons,
Yeah.
the ones without those fancy microfluidic chips, they tend to form just one giant neuronal ensemble. Like everybody's in the same clique, so to speak.
Right.
But in a real brain,
Yeah.
there are tons of neuronal ensembles,
Correct.
each representing different bits of information. Memories and skills, and it's this diversity
Yeah.
that makes the brain so complex and fascinating.
So are you saying these new lab-grown neurons with the chips
Yes.
are actually forming multiple neuronal ensembles?
Exactly. That's the breakthrough.
Wow.
By using the chips
Yeah.
to guide the connections, they've been able to create neurons that show up to 6 distinct neuronal ensembles.
That's amazing. So it's a lot closer to a real brain than anything we've ever seen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a major step forward
So cool.
in creating more realistic models to study the brain with.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
So we have these neurons in a dish connected in these specific ways,
Yeah.
forming multiple ensembles
Right.
and capable of learning what's next.
Right. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, what are the implications of all this?
Well, that's what we're going to dive into next.
Okay.
The possibilities are kind of mind-blowing.
Sounds like we're just getting started.
We are.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we've got these mini brains in a dish now, complete with learning abilities.
Yeah.
My mind's like blown.
I know, right? It's amazing.
Where could this lead us?
Well, the implications are pretty huge
Right.
and really exciting.
Yeah.
So, like, right away, drug development comes to mind.
Okay.
You know, testing new drugs for neurological diseases.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long process, expensive,
Right.
and a lot of times they rely on animal models
Right.
that don't perfectly mimic us.
Yeah. So using these lab-grown neurons could be a game changer for seeing how drugs affect the human brain, right?
Exactly. So imagine testing a new drug
Okay.
on a network of human neurons.
Yeah.
That acts like a real brain. We
Right.
could see how effective it is
Right.
and any side effects
Yeah.
way more efficiently and accurately.
And that could speed up finding new treatments
Exactly.
for people who need them.
Totally. Yeah.
That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but could this go even beyond just brain diseases?
Oh, for sure.
Really?
Yeah, remember the nervous system goes throughout your whole body.
Okay.
So things like chronic pain, autoimmune disorders,
Right.
even heart disease,
Wow.
all involve complex interactions between the brain and other organs.
Yeah.
So this gives us a model,
Yeah.
a way to see how those interactions work.
Okay.
And that could mean better therapies for all sorts of things.
So it's not just about fixing the brain itself,
Right.
but
Wow.
seeing how it talks to the rest of the body
Exactly.
and how that can go wrong.
Yeah, it's about the communication pathways.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what about learning and memory?
Mm-hmm.
Like, could this help us understand Alzheimer's better?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
So Alzheimer's, it disrupts neural networks.
Right.
And there's a loss of connections between brain cells.
Okay.
So if we can study how these neuronal ensembles form
Mhm.
and change in healthy brains,
Okay.
we can get insight into what goes wrong in diseases like that.
So having these lab-grown neurons that can learn gives us a whole new way to study how diseases develop.
Exactly.
And maybe even stop them.
Yeah, we could test different drugs and therapies,
Right.
see how they affect the networks,
Right.
and maybe even personalize treatments based on someone's genes.
Wow. So it's like having a personalized brain model for each patient.
Yeah, that's the dream. And this research gets us closer.
This is so cool.
It is. It's very cool.
But with any new tech, there's got to be ethical stuff to think about. Right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
As we learn more about the brain and create these sophisticated models,
Yeah.
we need to be really careful
Yeah.
and have some serious discussions about what this all means ethically.
You mentioned consciousness before.
Yeah,
That seems like a big one.
it is a big one.
Could you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, so like, could these lab-grown neurons ever become conscious?
Right.
That's a huge question.
It is.
Scientists, ethicists, philosophers are all trying to figure that out.
Wow.
We don't even fully understand what consciousness is
Right.
or how it happens.
Right.
But as we make these neural networks more and more complex,
Yeah.
we got to consider that they might become aware.
Okay, so we need to be thinking about these ethical dilemmas now,
Yeah.
before the tech gets too far ahead of us.
Exactly.
It's like uncharted territory.
It is.
We need to be careful.
We do.
This is kind of scary.
It is, but also super exciting.
Yeah.
It's like a new frontier
Right.
with amazing potential,
Yeah.
but also potential dangers.
So finding that balance between progress and responsibility is key.
Yeah, I think so.
We don't want to lose our values in the pursuit of knowledge.
Right. We have to be mindful.
This has been so eye-opening.
It has.
We've gone from growing neurons
Yeah.
to talking about consciousness.
That's amazing, right?
It's mind-blowing.
It really is.
And it seems like we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah. There's so much more to learn and discover.
For sure. Wow. It's crazy to think we started talking about these tiny tunnels on a chip. And now we're talking about consciousness.
I know, right?
It's pretty amazing. This research really is groundbreaking.
It is. It really pushes the boundary.
Makes you wonder what's next.
Yeah, for sure.
What's so cool about this field is that it's not just about the biology. It's like, what makes us human?
Yeah, totally.
We're talking about the organ that makes us us.
Right, exactly.
Our thoughts, feelings, who we are.
Yeah.
And now we can study it in ways we never could before.
It's incredible. And it's all thanks to human ingenuity and our curiosity, you know.
Totally. We always want to know more.
Yeah.
About the world and about ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you said this research is still pretty new.
Oh, yeah. It's early stages.
Where do you see it going in the next few years?
Well, I think we're going to see these lab-grown brain models evolve really quickly. Like right now, we can create networks of neurons with that learning ability. Yeah. And the multiple ensembles.
Right.
But as the tech gets better, we might be able to make even more complex systems that can mimic like specific parts of the brain.
Oh, wow.
Or even like whole brain functions.
So like we could have a lab-grown hippocampus.
Exactly.
The memory part of the brain.
Yeah, or the prefrontal cortex.
Right, for decisions and planning.
Yeah, and imagine what we can learn.
That'd be amazing.
About how those parts develop, how they work together, how disease affects them.
Right.
It's like having a virtual brain to experiment on without the ethical issues.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, these models let us study the brain safely and ethically, which could lead to some huge discoveries.
And new treatments.
Exactly.
But even with these models, we still have to think about the ethics.
Of course, always.
Especially as they get more complex.
Yeah, like we were saying, that question of consciousness. Yeah. It's a big one. What if these models become aware?
Right. We need guidelines for how to handle that.
Exactly. It's like we're writing a whole new chapter in our ethical handbook dealing with these complex systems.
It's pretty profound.
It is. And we need to do it together. Yeah. Scientists, ethicists, everyone.
Right. Everyone needs to be involved.
Yeah, because this tech could change how we understand the brain and ourselves.
So we need to be thoughtful.
Exactly. Responsible.
What's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's that we're living in a really amazing time for neuroscience.
Yeah.
Being able to grow neurons that learn in a dish.
It's amazing.
It is. It's a huge achievement. It opens up so many possibilities to understand the brain, treat diseases, explore consciousness.
Yeah.
But we have to remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely.
We need to use this tech wisely.
And ethically.
Yes, exactly.
Well said. It's a really exciting time to be following all of this.
It is. I agree.
I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about lab-grown brains.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
In the future.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's been so interesting.
Yeah, it's been great.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you learned something new.
And that you're as excited about the future of the brain
as we are.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating field.
Absolutely.